Nebbia is a revolutionary showerhead that saves you money by using 45% less water, but with a stream of water that's way more powerful than what you get with other showerheads. To get 15% off, go to nebbia.com/Pacman and use the code Pacman. The House of Representatives will be voting later this month on whether to make Washington, D.C. the 51st state of the United States. CBS News reporting that House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer wrote in a letter to colleagues 2-3 days ago that at some point during April, the House will hold a vote. Do we make Washington, D.C. the 51st state? Now, of course, it will almost certainly pass the House, and it will almost certainly go nowhere in the Senate. Most Republicans have expressed that they are against making Washington, D.C. the 51st state. This would not be and will not be the first time that the House of Representatives votes to do this. The House already approved a D.C. statehood measure in 2020 by a vote of 232 to 180, but it did not even come to the floor of the Senate. Now, in 2020, the Senate was controlled by Republicans. Democrats now control the Senate. It's 50-50. Democrats have a majority because by controlling the White House, Kamala Harris becomes the tie-breaking 51st vote in the Senate. But most legislation needs 60 votes to go forward. This is not the type of thing making Washington, D.C. a 51st state. That's not something you can move forward on via budget reconciliation by every analysis that we've seen so far. So you need to find 10 Republicans. And it is extraordinarily unlikely. We are not aware of 10 Republicans that want to move forward with Washington, D.C. as a 51st state. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has committed to bringing it to the floor for a vote. But again, this gets back to the filibuster. And when we talked, what was it, January, maybe February, when we talked about the possible paths forward on the filibuster, one of the things that we explained was even if there's something you could pass with 50 votes, you still need 60 to end debate. This is how the filibuster works. And we talked about some filibuster reforms, making it a talking filibuster, requiring 40 senators in the Senate to keep debate going at all times. We've talked about all these things. None of these changes have been made. And so we listed D.C. statehood and Puerto Rican statehood as specific possible issues that will go nowhere unless some kind of filibuster reform is done. Well, it's happening now. Sometime this month, the House is going to vote on making Washington, D.C. a 51st state. It is likely to pass. It will then go to the Senate, and by every indication, there will not even be a vote on it. Of course, I am in favor of D.C. statehood. We've talked before about how the population of Washington, D.C. at 700,000 is larger than the population of the state of Wyoming, which has 2 senators. It's larger than the population of the state of Vermont, which has 2 senators. Those in Washington, D.C. have no voting representation in Congress, but they do have, just as a sort of factual note, Eleanor Holmes Norton is a representative for Washington, D.C. in the House, but is a non-voting delegate. So that's the latest. I've said I would love to see this issue of D.C. statehood dealt with in a serious manner by Joe Biden. The House is going to vote, and then it is likely going to stall in the Senate. And at a certain point, Democrats and Joe Biden are going to have to decide, are we committed to getting these things done to the degree that we are going to do something about the filibuster, understanding that any changes they do make to the filibuster could be a double-edged sword that comes back against them when they are not in control. I support filibuster reform. I support Washington, D.C. as a 51st state. I would love to hear from you. How should Democrats handle this? I've been covering how right-wing media has been covering the Biden administration for several months now. And the bottom line is that they do not know what the hell to do with themselves. The Joe Biden administration so far has been completely absent of scandals. They've made some progress in some areas. They've turned around some of the disasters left behind by the Donald Trump administration. For example, vaccination has accelerated dramatically. The economy continues to recover. Jobs are recovering. Stock market is at a record high. Joe Biden passed a coronavirus stimulus. He's now pushing infrastructure reform. He's doing guns. He's doing a lot of different things. So right-wing media has had to come up with scandals, but they're really boring, and they're sort of what I would call fake scandals. One is the focus on why Joe Biden and Kamala Harris won't go to the border. And of course, they have advisors. They don't need to go to the border to understand what's going on at the border. But that's one fake scandal that the right has been pushing. They've done the cancel culture stuff, focusing occasionally and intermittently on Dr. Seuss or Major League Baseball or whatever the case may be. They try gotcha questions at press briefings with Joe Biden's press secretary, Jen Psaki, or sometimes with Joe Biden himself. And the gotcha questions fail day after day after day in a humiliating way. Here is the latest fake scandal. I present to you now an entire Newsmax segment devoted to how Kamala Harris laughs and when she laughs. I'm not kidding. Here is a segment very concerned about Kamala's laugh and drawing a parallel to the Wicked Witch of the West, I guess, from The Wizard of Oz. Take a look.
So it got me thinking about Kamala's cackling, all right? She is probably going to be president sooner rather than later, all right? She's supposed to be the leader all women should look up to. But all I can actually remember her doing since taking office is cackling at the most strange moments, too. Watch.
Kids. Rachel. No.
Not everybody landed punches like you did, though. So you don't mean it.
Oh, it's not even funny. So I was racking my brain watching those clips right there, trying to figure out who in the heck does this woman remind me of? And then I realized she's from out west, and it hit me. Oh boy, that's her. That's cackling Kamala, the Wicked Witch of the West. Nancy Pelosi, move over. There's a new witch in town, and her name, of course, is cackling Kamala. Oh, how sad is that? She is going to be president, by the way. I don't think Joe Biden's going to be in here for much longer. We'll see, right? I don't wish any harm to him at all, but we shall see.
Guys, Kamala is laughing the wrong way and at the wrong time. This is an explosive issue. Now, if you thought, first of all, how many segments has Newsmax done about how male politicians laugh? You're asking an interesting question. And as far as I know, the answer is 0. Secondly, is there some sense in which this is refreshing? Because we know that these aren't real scandals. What I mean by that is Trump failing on coronavirus and the number of deaths that caused. Trump regularly making the U.S. a global laughingstock. Trump launching a misguided trade war. Trump crushing farmers with his policy. All of these real issues. Now the scandal is how Kamala Harris laughs and whether Major League Baseball should be boycotted. Is there some sense in which it's refreshing that these aren't real embarrassing scandals at a global level? I don't know. But in all seriousness, they have no idea what to do with themselves. And it's getting very embarrassing. I would expect more of this. Now, at some point, there may be a real Biden administration scandal. Many administrations have scandals. Like, for example, when Barack Obama wore a tan suit, that rocked the world. So at some point, there may be a real scandal, and it could very quickly become a sort of boy who cried wolf type of situation. But Kamala laughing, guys, come on, you're embarrassing yourselves. Let me know your thoughts. You can find me on Twitter at @dpacman. We're going to take some of your calls. I'm going to answer many of your questions. We have a great program for you today. Stay with us. Back right after this. One of our sponsors today is Nebbia, the creator of the world's most innovative shower head. It uses only about half the water that other shower heads do, saving you money, helping the environment. But it's actually a lot more powerful than other shower heads on the market. It has twice the coverage of other shower heads. The water sprays with a ton of pressure. I've been using it in my bathroom at home. I love it. Only took a few minutes to set up, really easy, and it's been a totally different experience than any other shower head I've used. I can get in and out of the shower way quicker now because of how powerful it is. It only takes a few seconds to get completely rinsed off. So I was actually amazed that it's only using about half as much water. Nebbia also offers a number of shower accessories like shelves and curtains, which match perfectly with the design of the shower head. The shower head starts at just $199, but the first 100 people to go to Nebbia.com/Pacman and use code Pacman will get 15% off all Nebbia products. Welcome back. We are going to hear from some viewers and listeners via Discord momentarily at davidpacman.com/Discord. You can, of course, get a David Pacman Show membership, which gives you early access to full episodes of the show so you can hear live calls or avoid them, depending on your preference, much earlier than anybody else. All right. Very, very exciting stuff. DavidPacman.com/Discord is the place to get in touch with me. Why don't we go first today? Let's try something different. Let's go to Johanna in Chile. Johanna, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hello, how are you? Yes, please mute Discord because we're hearing the blings.
I don't know how to do that, actually.
All right. Well, what's on your mind today?
As you see, I'm from Chile. I know you are close to me in terms of Argentina.
Yes.
Greetings. Well, I have a question/comment. Is what do you expect from right-wing media asking all those gotcha questions to either Jen Psaki or other members of the cabinet of Joe Biden?
Sorry, you said asking all of those what questions? What was the word?
These gotcha questions.
Gotcha questions. Yeah. I think that they're trying to. So here's what's going on, Johanna. There's a couple things going on. One, it's Fox News, so they want to play gotcha with Democrats. That's what they do. But especially because Biden just hasn't really had any cartoonish, big, scandalous missteps. They're trying to create them. They're trying to create drama where, let's face it, Joe Biden's administration has been boring in the sense that he promised to do vaccines and we're doing 3 million vaccines a day. He said that he would do stimulus and he got it done. He's just working on stuff. So they're trying to create drama where there's very little drama.
But I think Jen Psaki,
Yeah.
I don't know how to pronounce it well, is doing a terrific job.
She's
actually.
doing a good job. I think that she's been underprepared on some of the immigration questions where she has some talking points in front of her, but she doesn't really deliver them in a coherent way. I think she could be better on immigration, but otherwise I think she's doing a very good job. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Johanna from Chile. Great to hear from you. Let's go next to, why don't we go? There's just so many people interested in getting on today. It's hard to know where to go. Why don't we go to Luke from Minnesota next? Luke, you're on the air.
Hello. So I was wondering what you would think of a potential boycott of the 2020 Olympics in China.
You mean the 2022 Olympics in China?
Oh, yes, 2022, yes.
Yeah, we talked about this on the bonus show earlier this week. There's 3 types of boycotts that you can do. There can be a diplomatic boycott where the athletes go, but the country doesn't send representatives. It's sort of like a diplomatic protest. You can do an athletic boycott where the country doesn't send any athletes. And then you can also do what's called the boycott light, which is diplomats and athletes go, but the diplomats make statements that are critical of the government. I tend to think that I want the athletes there. And we've had so many examples of conflict between countries during which athletes still went. And I don't particularly care about the Olympics, but I think it's a good message to say that the athletic community is going to compete in a way that is not tied to politics and let the diplomats do what they want. So if they want to do a diplomatic boycott, okay. If they want to do boycott light, but I would definitely send the athletes.
All right, thank you so much. That was Very good answer.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's we'll talk more about that, I think, as we get closer to that point in time. Let's go next to why don't we go to Edgar from Florida? Edgar, you're on the air.
Hey, Dave, thanks for having me on this call.
Ooh, Edgar, we're gonna have to do something about your audio.
Oh, yeah? Okay, no problem. Let me
That's
go
much
ahead
better.
and-
Yeah, very quick fix.
Awesome. So I just wanted to ask really your opinion on basically how Latin America deals with their own racial spectrum. I feel like a lot of the times in America, people may have an underrated observation of race relations between, for example, Afro-Colombian, African Colombians, and, white Colombians, for example.
Yes.
And for example, how in some countries, there's a lot of there's a big African Colombian maybe or Ecuadorian population, but maybe not so much in, for example, Argentina. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe.
You're absolutely
So I was
right.
wondering-
You're absolutely right. No, this is a super important issue, Edgar. I know that there are some people on the left who want to believe the U.S. is like the most racist country, and it's disastrous racism. We have problems with race in the United States. That is both individual racism. It's also structural racism and the after effects of structural racism that have not yet been resolved in the inequalities they deal with. But some of the stuff that goes on, there are many countries that are much more racist than the United States. And I'm not saying Argentina is the most racist country, but because I know Argentina because I was born there. Attitude there. First of all, there's almost no what we in the U.S. would call black folks. Down there, they often refer to black people who are just like more what we would call native or mixed populations.
Yes.
They refer to them as black, and often in pejorative terms. There is a lack of even understanding. Like I remember family members of mine who don't even realize that the way they're saying it is sort of strange would say, what is it like with the president being black in the United States? And I would be like, I don't know. I didn't really think about it in those terms. It's sort of just like there's a president. So that's Argentina. And there's a lot of other examples I could tell you. There are many countries where the issues of racism, we could say they're worse or not as bad or just different than in the U.S. But the U.S. is not, the worst offender of racism. The U.S. has tons of people. The U.S. has a horrible history of racism that's codified in law. And these are terrible things, and we're still working to fix them, and there's much work to be done. But it's not unique to the United States.
Absolutely. I agree. Wow. Thanks so much, Dave. And if I could ask one quick little extra question in there. You identify as basically a white Jewish person or as Argentinian. How would you kind of word that yourself? Because I have an Argentinian friend who his girlfriend kind of told him, but you're white, like ethnically or whatever, you look like a white guy, and he took offense to that, like, no, I'm Argentinian.
Well, here's what's really funny about that. By the U.S. Census definitions, I'm certainly Hispanic. There's no question about that, because and you can be white and Hispanic or non-white and Hispanic. So by the U.S. Census, I'm absolutely Hispanic. I also am in a sense a white guy in that people see me as a white guy, and I learned English young enough that I don't have an accent in English, except when I'm deliberately mispronouncing words for the lulls. You understand? Okay. But then there's another funny thing, which is really my ethnicity is Ashkenazi Jewish. Like when I do my DNA test, it doesn't come back, European, German, French. It comes back Ashkenazi Jewish. White supremacists don't see me as white. Now, why I care what they see me as maybe is a different question for a different day. But the bottom line is I identify as a white Hispanic. That's the way that I mostly see myself.
Hey, same here, buddy.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I appreciate the time, David.
All
Thanks
right,
a lot. Great
Edgar
answers,
from
man.
Florida, powerful phone call. Very, very exciting. Okay, why don't we go next to Calvin from Colorado? Calvin, are you glad to have the All-Star game coming your way?
Yes, I am.
Good. What's on your mind?
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about the infrastructure bill.
Yep.
And it's pretty expansive. And Kirsten Gillibrand today tweeted out that paid leave and childcare and caregiving are all infrastructure. Do you agree with that?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I mean, okay, so obviously roads and bridges, nobody disagrees with. That's infrastructure. Electrical grid, broadband, green energy, many people, but not everybody on the right agrees are infrastructure. Childcare and paid leave. I mean, listen, I have no problem getting it done via infrastructure. No problem whatsoever. Is it infrastructure in the same way as some of this other stuff? I mean, I guess the argument in favor would be that you are enabling many systems, including raising children because you're able to take time off from work without losing money. You're enabling many systems to work better. You're helping the educational system. You're helping, culture, society. So I like, you can make the argument. I don't know that it's super obvious to me, but if it can be done through infrastructure, I'm glad to do it that way. I'd have to read more about it, I think.
Right. I try to take a really holistic view on infrastructure, and I think they're on the right track.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, let's see what can be done. I think that's also another question. At what point does it become impossible to get done? And I don't know what the answer is, but you're definitely going to need all Democrats on board. Yeah. I question whether family leave appeals to all 50 Democrats in the Senate as part of an infrastructure bill. I don't know that it does.
Yeah.
Okay, Calvin from Colorado, thank you very much for the call. I appreciate it. Let's go next to Harsh from Dallas. You're on the air. What's on your mind?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hey, Dad. Nice to talk to you.
Likewise.
I started following your content recently. I'm fairly new to this country as well. I just had a small question.
Sure.
So you frequently talk about re-education and media literacy for a lot of people in this country.
Yes.
I was just wondering, how would you hypothetically make these ideas mainstream, and how do you push these ideas without sounding like Nazi propaganda?
Sorry, you're saying that talking about media literacy could sound like Nazi propaganda?
Yeah, because re-education, when you use the term re-education, that sounds like what China is doing to Muslims.
Oh, but I don't call it that. I mean, what I say is we need to deal with the failings of the educational system. We need to be teaching media literacy and philosophy and critical thinking and epistemology starting probably in 6th or 7th grade. But no, you're right. I mean, to say that we need re-education camps or re-education in the U.S., the language of that would not play so well, and I think that should be avoided.
Okay. Do you think that's ever going to make it into a policy or something?
Well, at the state level, most education in the United States is governed by state boards of education. And there are states that do teach some of all of these things. So, yeah, I think it's a very achievable goal. Does the Texas State Board of Education want to be teaching media literacy and critical thinking to 7th graders? I don't know. Judging by the decisions they make on textbooks, it's not very clear to me. But I think that this is a completely achievable goal. Della. Okay, Harsh from Dallas, thank you very, very much for the call. We are going to take a very quick break. It's going to be very, very quick. If you're holding, don't hang up, because I'm going right back to the Discord phone lines momentarily. Quick break and back to the phones. The David Pakman Show depends on your support, and the easiest way is through membership, which includes the world-famous bonus show, as well as commercial-free audio and video streams of the show just for members. Sign up today at joinpakman.com. Coupon code saves you 40%, BETTER21. Okay, let's hear from a few more folks via Discord. You can join the Discord at davidpakman.com/Discord. Let's try overseas again. Why don't we go to Scott from Scotland? What's going on, Scott? Scott from Scotland, you are muted. You have to unmute yourself in order for me to hear you.
My apologies, my friend. Do you hear me well?
I do.
Fantastic. So a relatively, I don't want to say it's a minor point, but maybe not high on the list of priorities is legal immigration into the US. And I kind of speak from firsthand experience here. I was mid-move with work to the US last March when the COVID situation kicked off. And now we find ourselves in a kind of a precarious and non-moving position. And so I know that President Trump was obviously focused on illegal immigration, but he also did a pretty good job of decimating legal immigration as well through the various presidential orders he put in place.
Yes.
The last of which expired at midnight on March the 31st, which he enacted just before New Year's Day. So in theory, the presidential orders have disappeared for the most part for the kind of legal immigration bans. But what we're finding, and this is something our work attorneys are struggling with, is that embassies and US consulates around the world are still refusing to see people or offer appointments or even just say when they're going to start resuming services. So I was just curious from your perspective, where do you see legal immigration going under this new administration? And do you think it will improve? Do you think Biden will maybe clamp down on it and kind of readjust the system? Where do you see
I don't see a clamp down. What you're describing is not unique to the United States. I have friends that are dealing with this in different places. I have a friend that's in the middle of getting Portuguese residency through a so-called golden visa program, and it's taking forever. I have another friend who's in the middle of getting Israeli citizenship. All of these systems are just slowed down, and I think that as we get out of the pandemic, hopefully over the next 6 to 12 months, a lot of these bureaucratic nightmares will become slightly less nightmarish, but the question of policy is a different one. I think in the immediate, things are just going to go back to the way they were before the pandemic. Policy is going to be dealt with later.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do know that Biden and his administration were potentially looking at kind of changes to the H1 lottery system in particular, and just changing how that goes. But I guess it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the coming months.
No doubt about it. And so now are you no longer trying to move to the U.S.?
No, we're still in progress. I'm living in a half-packed house and have been since last March. I had an embassy appointment last March, and then they postponed it and postponed it again and postponed it again. We put in an exemption request for national security exemption because I work in areas related to national security, and the consulate rejected it without even reading it. So we're in a bit of a strange state at the moment, but still very much pursuing trying to get things sorted out.
All right. Well, I hope things normalize for you.
Thank you, David.
All right. Scott from Scotland, thank you so much for the call. We are speaking to folks via Discord, as we often do. You can find the Discord at davidpakman.com/Discord. That's the way to do it. Let's go to, how about AJ in Oregon, or as the former president said it, Oregon? AJ, what's going on?
Hey, David, can you hear me?
Just barely, AJ. We've got you cranked up, and it's just a whisper.
How about now? Is that better?
Barely. What's going on? Let's see if we can get your question out.
I was wondering if you had a magic wand to enact any policy regarding police reform, what would you change and why?
I have a whole video clip about this where I lay out about 8 to 10 different points, and it includes training, social work training for police officers. We talk about body cameras. We talk about civilian review boards that actually work, a national bad actors database. There's about 8 to 10 different points. I've outlined it pretty specifically, and there's probably even more that could be added to it, but definitely check that clip out. It's on YouTube.
Okay, but not anything specifically out of those, like there isn't anything that you would place above all the others?
No, I didn't prioritize the list. I mean, it's a list of about 8 to 10 things. I didn't rank them, if that's the question.
Okay. I guess more specifically, I was wondering about the body cameras specifically and their impact, because I noticed a lot of times with these issues with police brutality, we're really dependent on body cams to get an unbiased sort of recording of the event.
Yeah, my general view is I like the idea of body cameras it shouldn't be so easy for them to just not record at exactly the key moment. And then you hear about, oh, the footage is missing, the camera didn't turn on. I know that there are some small studies that claim complaints for use of force went up when body cameras were put in place. And a lot of right wingers will point to that and say, see, we don't need body cameras. At the macro level, everything I've read is that use of force complaints go down when body cameras are put in place. So I think there's still details to sort out, but from everything I've read, I'm in favor of body cameras.
And just the last thing on that, so would you, in the course of events where a body camera is turned off or not available, would you hold the police department accountable for that missing footage if body camera reform was put in place where they required everyone to record the course of events?
I don't know how you manage that, because there's a big difference between the officer deliberately turns the camera off, which really it's a question whether they should even have the ability to do that, or everything's recorded and then in the cloud, but somehow the footage disappears, to just genuinely there's a technical issue. You need a system for managing all of those different circumstances. I don't know exactly what that system is right now.
All right. Thank you very much. I love the show.
All right. There is AJ, barely audible, but we were able to make it work. Always a good thing. Let's go next to, let's go to Mohammed from Qatar. I don't believe we've ever had a call from Qatar before. Mohammed, what's on your mind? Mohammed, you have to unmute if you want me to be able to hear you. Mohammed from Qatar, I would love for you to be the first Qatari caller, but that's probably not going to happen the way things are looking. All right. No Mohammed from Qatar. That's too bad. That's too bad. I was really looking forward to that. Let's go to Orv from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Hi, David. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, great. Thank you again for taking my call.
Pleasure.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about, I guess, student loans and sort of the crisis that's going on with that. Clearly, the Biden administration and congressional Democrats are aiming at canceling some form of debt, whether that be $5,000 to $50,000.
Yep.
It seems that there are some subsector of America that is a little bit hesitant to do this for various reasons, whether that be paying them down already or not having them in the first place, although it does seem that the majority of Americans do support that. And I guess my question would be, how do we address that? Would there possibly be, in the long term, versus just, obviously clearly canceling some portion of that debt is going to alleviate some of the issue in the short term, but the long term, it seems to me that predatory loans are maybe more of the issue rather than the actual
debt.
So
here's my view. Because if we were rebuilding the system from scratch, we would just build it in a different way that would prevent the cycle of it's so easy to get student loans, which makes it easy for colleges to raise prices, because then you just get the loans and then you owe more money, but wages don't go up and it becomes unsustainable, which is what we have. That's the crisis that we have. We would build the system differently, but being that we are where we are, there should be some degree of student loan forgiveness. And I've seen a lot of different proposals about what that should be and how it should be targeted. As I've said before, it doesn't strike me that the right way to do it is to forgive every dollar of student debt for everybody. That doesn't make sense to me. But I think that some fixed amount plus more with certain requirements attached to it is a good way to go. But you're completely right that that doesn't really solve the problem, because if you just have a policy of we forgive everyone's loans forever, then schools just keep making school more expensive, and the cycle essentially continues. So
and I think you kind of get back into that same cycle where we're going to wipe the slate clean, but then we haven't really addressed the root issue of the problem.
Exactly.
And, what I'm thinking in my head is does it make sense to maybe go with or establish some sort of a federal loan program where there is a little to no interest rate, where we're providing, federal dollars as like a loan.
So that
given you're
exists
paying them
already.
back
That
income-based?
that exists already. For grad school, I had the federal loans where interest accrual is suspended for periods of time, and so that exists. It could be expanded. I think ultimately something needs to be done to bring the cost of college in line with wages, because if you look at how the cost of college has changed relative to wages in many fields, it's completely out of whack. If you look at cost of college relative to inflation, relative to cost of living, it's completely out of whack. So that's what needs to be gotten under control. I'm not saying the government just needs to decide what prices are. I don't think that that's the solution. Government sets prices on private and public schooling, but something needs to be done to get that under control. And the student loan piece is a problem that subsidizes colleges continuing to charge more and more. And a one-time debt forgiveness is not going to deal with that issue.
Sure. Yep. All right. Well, hey, thanks again for taking my call. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Very important issue. Orv, appreciate the call. Why don't we go next let's go to Miguel from Lima, Peru, one of the places I was to visit in 2020. But then, Miguel, the pandemic hit, and I've not been able to do it yet.
That's too bad. We would have liked you to be here.
I would have liked to have been there. Yes, I can.
Great. So my question is about vaccinations. In particular, being from a country where only about 1% of the population has been able to get vaccinated, the issue being that we're not able to get vaccines into the country as efficiently as other countries have been. I know that some people who have the economic capability to do it are going to places like the U.S. in order to get vaccinated.
Yes.
And in some parts of the U.S. that's legal. I think in Texas it is. I know a lot of people personally who have been there, and I wanted to know your opinion on the morality behind people who aren't citizens of the U.S. going to the U.S. specifically to get vaccinated.
Well, listen, the morality, it's less a question of the morality of doing it. It's more of, is it allowed and or are they lying? I mean, there was a bunch of time where wealthy Argentinians were flying from Buenos Aires to Miami and getting vaccinated in Miami and doing shopping and then going back to Argentina. And eventually when Florida found out about it, they said they were stopping it, that you had to show proof of residency in Florida. They said it, but from what I understand, they're not really checking, so you can just lie. So for me, the morality is more about, are you doing something dishonest, rather than if the rules are, if it's 65 plus, it doesn't matter where you live. You could live in any state in any country as long as you're 65 plus. You're not really doing anything wrong if you can afford to go to that state and to get the vaccine. It's really more of an administrative question. I think the spirit of the doses that the Biden administration has obtained are for Americans, and that's economic nationalism. Countries are mostly looking out for themselves right now, and I understand why, and it's creating a huge imbalance where there are poor countries that have very few vaccines and may have none for a long period of time. I don't know exactly how to solve that, but the morality of an individual, if the state is allowing it, the individual is not really doing anything wrong.
Right. That makes sense. It's kind of the way I'm seeing it. If I have the opportunity to go and get vaccinated myself, or in particular my parents who are older, I would want them to do that. Also, I mean, it's definitely an issue of when we will be able to get vaccinated here in Peru. And honestly, as someone who lives here, it's mostly a question of when the U.S. and Europe will have reached herd immunity. Everyone who wants to get vaccinated has gotten vaccinated.
Well, understandably, those could be two different things too. You may have a situation in the U.S. where everyone who wants it has gotten it, and we are not at herd immunity. That could happen.
That's a good point. Yeah. At which point, I would hope that the U.S. or Europe would just sell the vaccines to countries like Peru, and then I could get vaccinated.
Yeah, I think the U.S. is planning to give them, not just sell them. I think the U.S. plans to give them to other countries.
Right.
Hello. Yep. There you go. So yes. All right. Well, we're going to follow it, and hopefully more vaccines in more places soon.
Thank you, David.
All right. Thank you. A beautiful phone call from Lima, Peru. why don't we go next? We have a little bit of time left, and we could talk to some more people. Let's go to John from Orange County, California. What's going on, John?
Hey, David, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Well, basically, I just wanted to get your thoughts about the future of Georgia, in terms of like national elections in the future.
Okay.
Because I've heard from like Sam Cedar and his crew that these ideas about if it's going to become a battleground state or not, and that's something that I thought would be an interesting topic to hear you talk about.
Yeah, we've addressed this a number of times. Demographically, there seems to be evidence that points to Georgia being a more reliable purple state. Certainly what happened in 2020, Joe Biden won. 2 Republican incumbent senators were unseated by 2 Democratic challengers. There's every indication that this could be a permanent swing state rather than the mostly reliable red state. I think 2022 will give us a little bit of a signal, and then 2024 maybe more of one.
Right. And sort of, I guess a follow-up to that, and this thing is an interesting question, is why do you think that change happened? And I know that part of that reason is probably due to the Trump administration, but just
demographics and voter registration. 2 things have gone on in Georgia. People moving to Georgia that are more left-leaning, and people like Stacey Abrams and others getting left-leaning people who may not be engaged with the political system registered and out to vote.
Right. I see. Okay. Well, thank you, David.
Just, John, I have to ask, were you slapping something while you were talking to me?
No.
You weren't? Interesting.
No, I was not.
Interesting. All right, John, thank you very much for the call.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. John from Orange County, California. All right, everybody. That's all the time I have for calls today. I'm sorry. I am sorry I wasn't able to get to everybody, but I will take calls again. The David Pakman Show depends on the support of our viewers and listeners, and one way to keep us going is through Patreon, where you can pledge as little as $1 per month or as much as you want at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Great perks and benefits as well. Read about them. All right, let's get into audience questions for the week. David, shouldn't Joe Biden be bragging about the stock market the way Trump did? I don't mean because Joe Biden is actually responsible for the stock market, but because Trump seemed to do well when he bragged about it. I like the way that this question is asked because it's not being asked as a question of whether Joe Biden deserves credit. I mean, as we've talked about before, to some degree, the sort of economic circumstances over which a president has some influence impact the stock market. But the stock market performance alone is often used kind of as a political football. And Donald Trump certainly regularly would talk about how great the stock market is doing when it was up, not when it was down. And many of his followers fell for it. It's really a question of whether politically it would be advantageous for Joe Biden to do it. I think that it's not clear that it would, because Joe Biden's base is so different than Donald Trump's base. Donald Trump's base was disproportionately made up of people who were never involved in politics before, or who were, and they fell for Republican nonsense. So they were like the perfect marks for just hearing from Trump about the stock market. And the Joe Biden base is different. And it doesn't strike me as something that would be so obviously beneficial for Joe Biden to brag about the stock market in the same way that Donald Trump did. Now, that being said, just because you don't have the sort of sycophantic cult of personality cheerleaders on the left that you had on the right around Donald Trump, doesn't mean Joe Biden shouldn't talk about the stock market in the context of talking about how we're doing. So certainly Joe Biden should be saying, we're vaccinating more than 3 million a day. COVID deaths are down 77%. Cases are down roughly the same percentage. Unemployment is down. We are seeing job creation. Stock market is at record highs, on and up, right? So it's a package overall. But if the question is, should Joe Biden start tweeting about the stock market from a golf course, the way, the caricature of what Donald Trump was doing, I don't think it's what Joe Biden should be doing. One other aspect to why it's important for Biden to talk about the stock market numbers is that you do want to try at least to get the media to put out messages that are advantageous to you. Any president would try to do this. And rather than just leaving it to corporate media to figure out, oh, the stock market's doing well and Joe Biden's president, and we were told that it was going to be a disaster by Trump if Joe Biden were president. Why not? Again, this is sort of like communications and PR. Feed the story to the media in some sense. One other aspect of this, when Donald Trump insisted during the campaign that if Joe Biden wins, your 401ks will be worth nothing, the economy will collapse, unemployment will explode, COVID death will explode, suicides will explode, you won't have windows in buildings, you won't have indoor heating, you won't have indoor cooling, you'll have to flush your toilet 10 to 15 times, you'll have to run your dishwasher 2 or 3 times to get your dishes clean. We knew all that stuff was crazy. But in particular now, Joe Biden talking about what the stock market is doing might be a good way to get media outlets to put more Republicans on the spot and say, you agreed with Trump during the campaign that if Joe Biden were president, this would happen to the market. The market's at record highs. What say you? They would almost certainly retreat to something like, well, Joe Biden has inflated the stock market by, quote, printing money through stimulus and he wants to do infrastructure, but they'll be on the ropes. And they will have a defense. It'll be a really stupid defense. So the position Joe Biden should take is take credit for turning things around and talk about the stock market as one of many indicators as to how things are continuing to improve. David, the more I see the left get involved in these cultural issues like cancel culture and wokeness, the more I think the left should just not even bother to fight those issues. What do you think? This is a very interesting question. We see that right now there's a really big divide between the Democratic and Republican Party in the sense that the Democratic Party is almost exclusively about legislation and issues, and the Republican Party is not. And earlier this week, I argued with Republican strategist Amanda Mackey about it, who I still don't even know exactly what point she was trying to make. But needless to say, her argument is, well, now Republicans can't do policy because they don't control anything. Well, but they didn't do any policy during the Trump era either. As a result, the right is just fighting cultural issues. They're talking about cancel culture. They're talking about control, trans sports, control of the narrative by the left, wokeness, and all of this different stuff. I don't believe that the left should give up those issues, but I do think that it would be best for the left to realize that just because an issue is getting a lot of traction on Twitter and Fox News doesn't mean it's actually an issue that much of the Democratic electorate cares about. And you need to look only at the 2020 Democratic primary to understand that. And I know this is painful for many in my audience to hear. I wish it were different. But there were a lot of people, millions of people on the left, who spend a lot of time on Twitter and Reddit and saw the enthusiasm for Bernie Sanders at rallies and wrongly believed that the Bernie wing of the Democratic electorate is bigger than it actually is. It doesn't mean it's insignificant. It doesn't mean it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that it's not a wing with good ideas. It is. But the 2020 Democratic primary reminded us when it wasn't even close. I mean, Joe Biden really won very easily by millions of votes, even before it was, everybody bailed and all that stuff. What you see on Reddit and Twitter and on Newsmax or Fox News, it's not what the bulk of the country actually cares about. And similarly, for me, it's not about the left conceding or giving up on the cultural issues. It's understanding that most Americans are not focused in on trans sports, wokeness, Dr. Seuss, or cancel culture. They're just not. First of all, tons of Americans don't even pay attention to news in the way that you and I do. And of those that do, we know the issues that are most important. It's in no particular order: the economy, jobs, wages, healthcare, coronavirus, pandemic recovery. Those are the issues. Those are the primary issues. So once you understand that, and then you realize that very little of these culture wars involve actual policymakers in policy positions. This is an important distinction. Yes, Congressman Jim Jordan will go on Laura Ingram's show and talk about the cancel culture, Laura. You know, he does that. Matt Gaetz, when he's trying to distract from, investigations into child sex trafficking, he will talk about cancel culture. Trump I get it. You see people like, Marjorie Taylor Greene or whatever try to bring some of this stuff to the House floor. Jim Jordan says you need an investigation into Dr. Seuss. For the most part, very little of this culture war stuff is even touching real policy making, legislative time at the state level and at the national level. It's amplified by conservatives, a few of them. It's amplified by the internet. It's amplified by some right-wing media. So the way I would say it is, Democrats don't need to just concede a loss on cultural issues. Democrats don't need to not bother fighting on cultural issues. Democrats just need to recognize that the culture war is a distraction that Republicans have chosen to take on because they have no policy ideas other than prevent Democrats from doing anything. And they have nothing to actually bring to the table at this point in time. One last thought on this. Eventually, Democrats tend to be vindicated on most of these cultural issues. I mean, look at abortion, okay? It took, 40, 50 years? Abortion being legal in most cases is more popular now than at any point since Roe v. Wade. It took a while, but the culture shifted and caught up with where, quote, the left has been. Gay marriage. Most people in the U.S., including more than 50% of Republicans, now believe gay marriage should just be legal. It's been legal since 2015. Democrats, the left, have been fighting for that for much longer. Eventually, the culture came around. Marijuana approval, death penalty not being, you get it, right? So another reason not to engage in the way that the right wants to is that eventually the country tends to come around. Now, you don't want to ignore serious issues like death penalty, marijuana, et cetera, altogether, because if you do, then nobody's advocating for your side. But the cancel culture thing is different. And I do think that Democrats should just understand that this is not a big issue to most Americans, period. David, does Kamala Harris have a better shot at being president if Biden does run for re-election in 24 or if he does not? There's no way to answer this question without knowing what 2024 will look like. I get the gist of the question. It's unclear if Joe Biden is running for re-election. He recently said he plans to. It's my intention. That's not exactly I am running. He might run for re-election in 2024. And if he wins, maybe Kamala would run in 2028. He might not run in 2024, which would be an opportunity for Kamala Harris to run. I think that all we can say now is that being vice president is a good stepping stone to the presidency. There's arguably no better stepping stone. Now, I know tons of you are going to say, David, look at all the times vice presidents have run and they lost. Look at Al Gore. Look at, I don't even know. There's all these instances of vice presidents who ran and, look at Joe Biden in 2016. He didn't even win the primary. Okay. 15 vice presidents have eventually become president. Now, they didn't all win elections, right? There are other circumstances as well. So that's like a very high percentage of, compared to any other job, vice president being a good stepping stone to president. At any given time, there are 50 governors, there's 100 senators, there's one vice president. And it is historically a good statistical stepping stone doesn't mean that you win every time. So I have no idea whether, the question of whether it's better for Kamala to run in 2024 or 2028 depends on what's going on. If Biden has a hugely successful first term and says, I'm not going to run, it's probably good for Kamala Harris. If Biden has a very bad first term and doesn't run, it's probably not a great opportunity for Kamala Harris. Similarly to what might be happening in 2028, it's really less about a vice president running than it is about what are the circumstances in the country under that vice president's tenure, and what is the sort of mindset of the country. Joe Biden maybe would have done better in 2016 had there not been 8 years of virulently racist and xenophobic activation against Barack Obama, which Biden obviously was associated with as the vice president. It's very hard to go back and run any other scenario. So I tend to just look at history. Even though many VPs have tried to become president and lost, there is still no more statistically reliable job for becoming president of the United States than being vice president of the United States. And we will just have to wait and see what happens. We have a tremendous bonus show for you today. Get instant access by becoming a member at joinpacman.com. We are also here next week. No more vacation for a little while. We will see you on Monday if you are not a member, but you should be. You really should be. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. Nebbia is a revolutionary showerhead that saves you money by using 45% less water, but with a stream of water that's way more powerful than what you get with other showerheads. To get 15% off, go to nebbia.com/Pacman and use the code Pacman.